Imagine the quietest night you can think of. Just total stillness.
Yeah, almost unnerving sometimes.
Exactly. And then picture that silence just breaking, a sound that chills you right to the bone, maybe a whimper, then this awful thud.
It sounds like something from a horror film.
But it wasn't. This happened. Early hours, November 13th, 2022, Moscow, Idaho.
Right, inside a house where 4 college students were, probably asleep.
And this brutal attack unfolded. I mean, this kind of violence just hadn't happened in this town for, what, over 7 years?
It was completely shocking for the community, and for a long time, just questions, no suspects, no answers, just this horrible reality.
So that's the story we're going to really unpack today. The murders of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Goncalves, University of Idaho students.
Yeah, and what makes it so, I think, deeply unsettling is that contrast, isn't it? The sort of everyday college town setting, and then this extreme violence.
Absolutely. And we've looked through the news reports, the legal discussions that are out there.
Yeah.
We should mention the trial is still quite a way off, right? Scheduled for August 2025.
August 11th, 2025 is the current date set. So things are still developing. Our aim here is really just to understand what the evidence seems to show so far based on public documents and reporting.
And these weren't just names,
Yeah.
Ethan Chapin, he was 20. People said he just had this bright, outgoing personality, a freshman, into sports, his fraternity.
Just starting out. And his girlfriend, Xana Kernodle, also 20, a junior, her sister described her as just super positive, funny, someone who connected with people easily.
And then Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves, both 21 seniors, best friends forever, like since 6th grade, I think.
Inseparable, yeah. Kaylee was apparently really excited, planning a move to Texas for a marketing job after graduation.
Right. And Madison, also a marketing major, they worked together at a local restaurant, too. They were all just right there, on the cusp of everything.
Exactly. And it happened in this pretty standard off-campus rental house.
Yeah.
1122 King Road, 3 stories, 6 bedrooms, apparently kind of a social hub.
Yeah, a place where students hung out.
And again, to really get the shock, Moscow is a small college town. This level of violence was just completely out of the blue for them.
It's a terrifying reminder, isn't it, that awful things can happen anywhere.
It really is, even places that feel incredibly safe.
Okay, so let's try and piece together that night. Saturday, November 12th, going into Sunday the 13th. What do we know about their last hours?
Well, Kaylee and Madison, they were out at a place called the Corner Club, the local bar, left around 1:30 a.m.
Okay.
Then they stopped at a food truck, the grub truck, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Got back to the house around 1:45 a.m. maybe. The driver confirmed dropping them off.
And Ethan and Xana?
They were at a Sigma Chi fraternity party earlier that evening. They got back to the King Road house around 1:45 a.m. as well, so everyone was home by then.
And there was one more thing, right? A delivery.
Yeah, that's key. Around 4 a.m., there was a DoorDash delivery for Xana Kernodle. And that's pretty much the last confirmed activity for any of them.
4 a.m. And then silence. But a terrifying silence. Investigators believe the attacks happened sometime between 4 a.m. and 4:25 a.m. A really narrow window.
Incredibly narrow, and made even more chilling by that audio from a neighbor's security camera. At 4:17 a.m., it picked up, well, what sounds like a whimper, then a loud thud, and a dog starts barking repeatedly.
That's harrowing. And inside the house, there were survivors, 2 other roommates.
That's right. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke, they were on the lower floors.
And Dylan heard things, saw something.
She reported hearing, well, she thought maybe Kaylee was playing with her dog upstairs initially, but later she heard someone say something like, "There's someone here."
Oh, wow.
And then crying, which she thought came from Xana's room. She opened her door a couple of times, eventually seeing a figure leaving through the sliding glass door on the 2nd floor.
Did she describe the person?
She did. About 5'10" or taller, male, athletically built but not particularly muscular, black clothing, a mask covering the face, but she specifically mentioned seeing bushy eyebrows.
Bushy eyebrows. That's quite a detail. And what did she do then?
She locked herself in her room, understandably terrified.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the 911 call didn't come until almost noon, right? Bethany Funke called.
Yeah, 11:58 a.m., almost 8 hours after the estimated time of the attacks, Bethany called 911 reporting Xana as unconscious.
That delay, I mean, it's been talked about a lot. Do we know why it took so long?
The official documents, like the probable cause affidavit, they don't really spell out a reason for that delay. There's been speculation, obviously, maybe shock, maybe fear, maybe confusion about what exactly happened, but nothing definitive stated by authorities.
Okay. So when police finally arrived and went inside, what did they find?
It was, as you can imagine, an absolutely horrific scene. The coroner later determined the victims were likely asleep when the attack started.
But some fought back.
Yes, some showed defensive wounds, which suggests they were alerted or woke up and tried to resist. All four had been stabbed multiple times.
With a large knife, they said.
A large fixed-blade knife, and that weapon, crucially, has never been found.
So you have this incredibly violent scene, 4 young people dead, no weapon, no immediate suspect. Where do investigators even start? It must have seemed overwhelming.
Oh, completely. Authorities called it a very complex case right from the start. They had to meticulously retrace everyone's steps, talk to hundreds of people, and systematically rule individuals out.
Like, who did they clear early on?
Well, the surviving roommates, Dylan and Bethany, were cleared, another former roommate who'd moved out, the driver who took Kaylee and Madison home, the guy running the food truck, even Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack Ducour, he was looked at and cleared.
So they're crossing people off the list. But how do they get on to Bryan Kohberger? What were the key breakthroughs?
It really came down to 3 main pillars of evidence, combined with other circumstantial details. The big ones were DNA, cell phone data, and vehicle surveillance.
Okay, let's take the DNA first. That sounds crucial.
Absolutely pivotal. They found a tan leather knife sheath lying on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body.
A sheath, but no knife.
Exactly. And on the button snap of that sheath, the Idaho State Lab found a single source of male DNA, just one person's DNA.
Okay. And how did they connect that DNA to Kohberger?
They use something called investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. This is where they upload the DNA profile to public genealogy databases like GED Match or Family Tree DNA, trying to find relatives.
So not a direct match initially, but family members.
Right. The process identified potential relatives, which eventually led investigators to suspect Bryan Kohberger might be the contributor. To confirm, they needed his DNA.
How did they get that?
While he was driving cross-country with his father back to Pennsylvania for the holidays, investigators a la back in PA collected trash from his parents' home. DNA was extracted from that trash.
And did it match the sheath?
It was a familial match. The lab report said the DNA from the trash was at least 99.9998% likely to be the biological father of the individual, whose DNA was on the sheath snap.
Wow. So linking the sheath DNA directly to Kohberger's father.
Essentially, yes. And later, after his arrest, they got a direct DNA sample from Kohberger himself via a cheek swab, and that provided an even stronger statistical match to the DNA on the sheath.
Okay, that's powerful. What about the cell phone data?
Also very significant. They obtained Kohberger's cell phone records. They showed his phone stopped connecting to the cell network, essentially went offline at 2:47 a.m. on November 13th, while it was still in Pullman, Washington, where he lived.
Pullman isn't far from Moscow, right?
Just across the state line, about a 15-minute drive. His phone stayed offline until 4:48 a.m. when it popped back up south of Moscow near a town called Blaine, Idaho.
And that offline period, 2:47 to 4:48 a.m.
It completely covers the estimated time frame of the murders, 4:00 to 4:25 a.m. Investigators believe this wasn't accidental, that it was likely turned off deliberately to hide his location.
Was that the only time his phone was near the King Road house?
No, that's another key part. Records showed his phone had pinged off towers, providing service to the area around the victim's house on at least 12 separate occasions between June 2022 and the night of the murders.
12 times.
Mostly at night.
Often late at night or in the very early morning hours. It suggested a pattern of, well, at least being in the vicinity repeatedly. And one more thing. His phone was back near the King Road house later that morning, around 9 a.m. on November 13th.
After the murders had occurred.
Correct.
Okay, so
Right.
DNA connecting him to the scene, cell data putting him nearby repeatedly, and going dark during the crime. What was the third piece? The vehicle.
Right. Surveillance video from the neighborhood around 1122 King Road captured a white sedan driving past the house multiple times in the early morning hours.
What time?
First seen around 3:29 a.m., then again at 4:04 a.m. The car makes what looks like a 3-point turn and then is seen leaving the area at high speed around 4:20 a.m.
Right after that 4:17 a.m. audio from the neighbor's camera. Exactly. The FBI analyzed the footage and believed it was likely a 2011 to 2016 white Hyundai Elantra.
And Kohberger drove.
On November 29th, police at Washington State University, where Kohberger was a student, ran a query for white Elantras registered there. They found a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra registered to Bryan Kohberger.
Bingo.
Pretty much. Law enforcement then confirms seeing his car parked at his apartment complex in Pullman. Police later put out a public request on December 7th asking for tips about white 2011-2013 Elantras seen near the crime scene, maybe slightly narrowing the year range initially to generate tips.
So putting it all together, DNA on the sheath found at the scene, cell phone pinging near the house multiple times and going silent during the murders, and his specific make, model, and color car seen arriving and speeding away around the time of the attacks.
Those are the core pieces, yes. And then you have other supporting details.
Like what?
Well, the 4:17 a.m. audio we mentioned. Also, reports surfaced after his arrest about his behavior changing, allegedly wearing surgical gloves in public places like grocery stores, and being seen cleaning his car very thoroughly, inside and out.
And those traffic stops when he drove cross-country.
Right. He and his father were pulled over twice in Indiana on December 15th for following too closely. Minor stuff, they were let go with warnings. But crucially, it provided police body cam footage of Kohberger and the Elantra before his arrest, which could be useful later.
Okay, so the evidence is mounting. How did the actual arrest go down?
It happened in the early morning hours of December 30th, 2022. An FBI SWAT team and Pennsylvania State Police raided his parents' home in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania.
Must have been quite a scene.
Reports say he was found wearing examination gloves even inside the house and was apparently sorting trash into separate Ziploc bags, which seemed odd.
And they searched the house.
They did. They recovered items including a knife, though not confirmed as the murder weapon, a pistol, black face masks, and some ID cards found inside a glove in a box.
And then he was brought back to Idaho.
Pretty quickly. He waived extradition, arrived back in Idaho on January 4th, 2023, and the next day, the charges were formally unsealed. 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary.
The burglary charge is for entering the house with intent to commit murder.
Right, exactly. Entering with intent to commit a felony, which was the murders in this case.
So who is Bryan Kohberger? His background seems unusual given the charges.
It's definitely drawn a lot of attention. He was 28 at the time of the murders, and his academic focus was squarely on crime and the criminal mind.
He studied criminology.
Extensively. He has an associate's degree in psychology, bachelor's degrees in both psychology and cloud-based forensics from DeSales University, then a master's in criminal justice, also from DeSales.
And he was working on his PhD.
Yes, he was a PhD candidate in criminology at Washington State University in Pullman, right near Moscow. He was also working as a teaching assistant there for undergrad criminal justice courses.
Was he still working there at the time of the murders?
He was, although reports indicate there were some issues, and his TA position was apparently terminated sometime after the semester ended, possibly related to concerns about his interactions with colleagues or students.
And didn't he apply for a police internship?
He did. He'd applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department earlier in 2022. In his application essay, he wrote about his interest in helping rural law enforcement agencies by analyzing technological data patterns.
Which is kind of chilling in retrospect, given the cell phone data evidence.
It certainly adds a layer, doesn't it? His whole academic background, focusing on why people commit crimes, has obviously fueled a lot of speculation about potential motives, though none have been confirmed.
And there was something mentioned recently in legal filings about autism.
Yes, his defense team has indicated that Kohberger has been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD. They plan to use this as part of their mitigation strategy, particularly if the case reaches the penalty phase regarding the death penalty.
Okay, so let's talk about the legal process. It seems like it's been slow and complicated.
It has. There have been numerous hearings and filings since his arrest. He had his initial court appearance in Idaho in January 2023. Then, in May 2023, a grand jury indicted him on all charges.
And he pleaded not guilty.
Well, at his arraignment, when asked for his plea, he stood silent. So the judge entered a plea of not guilty on his behalf, which is standard procedure in that situation.
And the trial date kept getting pushed back.
Right. It was initially set for October 2023, but Kohberger waived his right to a speedy trial, allowing for more preparation time. The prosecution filed notice they intend to seek the death penalty if he's convicted.
There's also a gag order, right? Restricting what people can say.
Yes, a pretty strict one, issued early on. It limits what law enforcement, attorneys, investigators, and even the victims' families can say publicly about the case to avoid potentially tainting the jury pool.
And the trial location moved.
It did. Citing intense pretrial publicity in Leda County, where Moscow is located, the judge agreed to move the trial venue to Ada County, which is where Boise is. That's where it's currently scheduled for August 11th, 2025. Expected to be a long trial, maybe several weeks or even months.
Throughout all this, his defense team hasn't just been sitting back. They've been actively challenging the evidence, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. That's their job. They've filed numerous motions trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case.
This is like what specifically?
Well, the DNA on the knife sheath is a major target. They've argued the use of IgG is unconstitutional, questioned the methods, and even floated the idea that the DNA evidence might have been planted or transferred there innocently.
Planted. That's a strong claim.
It is. They're also trying hard to suppress the cell phone data and his digital history from various online accounts. With the car, they're questioning the certainty of the identification based on the surveillance footage. They want to exclude evidence of his Amazon purchases, things like a military-style knife, a sheath, a knife sharpener, bought months before the murders, arguing it's prejudicial and doesn't prove anything specific.
And Dylan Mortensen's testimony, the surviving roommate.
They've tried to limit her testimony, particularly challenging the significance of the bushy eyebrows description, suggesting it's not unique enough. They also want to block the use of a specific selfie photo of Kohberger that shows his eyebrows clearly.
So they're hitting every major piece of evidence. Are they offering alternative?
They've suggested alternative theories, yeah. Maybe 2 attackers, maybe 2 weapons. They've pointed to small amounts of unknown male DNA found elsewhere at the scene, not on the sheath, and a glove found outside the house is potentially pointing away from Kohberger.
Trying to create that reasonable doubt.
Exactly. And most recently, they've really focused on the surviving roommate's activities around the time of the murders.
What about them?
They've filed documents highlighting text messages between Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funke in the hours after the estimated attacks, but before the 911 call, their social media use during that time, and calls Bethany Funke maid, including to her father. The defense seems to be using this to challenge the established timeline and maybe question the roommate's initial accounts or perceptions.
So essentially arguing that maybe things didn't happen exactly when or how the prosecution says, based on what the survivors were doing.
That seems to be the implication they're building towards. It's all part of the strategy to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative.
It's such a chilling case. You have these 4 young people, their lives just brutally ended in a place that felt so safe.
It really shook that community and I think the nation, didn't it? The initial not knowing, the fear, and now this slow march towards a trial with all this complex, mostly circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, the lack of an eyewitness actually seeing the crime itself or a confession, it makes every piece of forensic and digital evidence that much more critical.
And it really highlights how far forensic science has come with things like IgG, but also the challenges. How do you weave all these threads, the DNA, the phone pings, the car sightings, the survivor's partial description into a narrative that proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
It really forces you to think about safety, randomness,
Yeah.
how fragile things can feel. And looking at all this evidence, especially the circumstantial parts, it really begs a difficult question, doesn't it?
What's that?
In a case like this, with so much technical data, but maybe no single smoking gun in the traditional sense, what level of certainty do we actually need, personally or legally, to believe someone is guilty or innocent?
That's the core question the jury will have to grapple with, isn't it? Weighing all the evidence presented by both sides.
And how do those defense arguments, those attempts to create doubt by questioning the DNA methods, the phone data, the timeline, how does that resonate? It's a lot to weigh.
It really underscores the whole principle of the justice system, right? The burden of proof is high, and the defense's role is crucial in testing the prosecution's case thoroughly. It's designed to be difficult, to ensure convictions are based on solid footing.
Well, this has been a really sobering, but I think important look at where the Bryan Kohberger case stands, just laying out the known facts and the legal path ahead.
A truly tragic story, and one that's far from over.
If you found this exploration compelling and you want to follow more cases like this, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do these deep dives regularly.
And you can also follow us on Spotify so you don't miss any updates or new analyses we put out.